Okay, so we have a new chart called the three realities. The illusionary person reality, the real relative reality, and the absolute reality. It is a depiction through the map of spirituality. As you can see, there is a correlation with the levels of consciousness and map of spirituality for us to better understand about these three realities. Many times people ask me, is this real? Is this an illusion? Many times people say, well, my life is an illusion. And I say, yes, the life you carry on your head is the illusion. But what you see, what you can touch, what you can smell, what you can taste is real, but it's the relative reality. So sometimes people really get confused what is real and what is not, especially when they start meditating and asking, these questions inside them. And they start to inquire what is true and what is real. So this is how this chart was born, which explains very clearly those three realities. And at the very bottom we can see the person, the little bubble, which is the person. And that correlates from the very lowest level of consciousness, 20, right up to 440, which is called the illusionary person reality. Now what does it mean? That means that every person carries the density of the mind. The density of the mind, which is there in the lowest states, it is completely identified, a person is completely identified with the density of the mind, and thus if I look at any person in the street or outside, I can see that, how they're carrying this cloud over their head, or let's call it a bubble, their personal bubble. So every person is carrying the density of the mind, which is their personal bubble around their heads and shoulder. Actually, it comes mainly from the heart, and this cloud or bubble is clouding the heart, and maybe around a meter and a half above around their head. So it's quite a big cloud in which every person carries their own unique world view, their own unique illusionary world view. So every person accumulates an idea of what this world is supposed to be. Their parents told them something, the society, the school, the educational system, the science, but more the older versions of science. Maybe the book science, because the quantum physics is now very accurate. So every person then accumulates throughout their lifetime of what this is supposed to mean. And until the person reaches the inner light, all this knowledge is very theoretical. It's very rarely experienced, what is real and what is not. So the inner light then allows the person to start perceiving the truth, to start perceiving what is actually real. So this personal cloud, this personal bubble is the accumulated knowledge of what this is supposed to mean. The lower the consciousness, the more distorted it is. Very important to say the word distorted, because those distortions come from programming, from society, from educational system, from the governments and the economy and so forth. These are distorted systems created by people out of their unconsciousness. So as Buddha said, even if something has been practiced for 1,000 years as a religion or a ritual, it should still be inquired whether it's real and true. Because people can live in distortion for 1,000 years if they don't know the truth. So they continue the same rituals or the same ideas. So as we come to the higher self, we open up to the real relative reality. We open actually to the universe. We open to the laws of nature. We open to the universal laws. Like the law of attraction is a very popular one, but there are many other ones, like laws of vibration, laws of resonance, laws of balance, harmony, love, and many, many more, of how the cause and effect, which is the fundamental law in the Buddhist view, but it is the universal law. So these are the actual true laws of the universe, of how this universe actually really works. And this is why it's called the relative real reality, which opens up through the higher self, and it goes right up to the quantum zero-point field, or the universal mind, the universal consciousness. So we can see that the higher self is the real relative reality, the I am presence, the real relative reality, and even universal consciousness is the real relative reality, right up to the level of 1000. Because as we come into the highest states of consciousness, we start to transcend even the universe itself when we go into the source, consciousness itself. Then we transcend the universe, we transcend even all the laws of causality, the causal body, the universal dark matter, the universal unconsciousness or the void. And this is when out of 850 above to 1000 we start to transcend until we break free completely into the absolute reality, which is unchanging, undivided, unseparated, untouchable. And in this picture, I really wanted to depict that this universe is a one version of reality. It's universe from Latin means universe, one version. And there are other bubbles, as you can see, the second universe, and third, and fourth, and fifth. And the absolute reality is the substratum in which all these universes appear and from which all the universes were born. So the absolute self, absolute reality is not dependent on energy, is not dependent on any universal laws of the localized universe, and therefore it is the final liberation, the final freedom, and the source of all possible universes, realities, which are all real, but they're relatively real. However, they're all real, and you should not either diminish them or say, your life is meaningless, or that you don't need to eat, or that body is not important. So this is where people do ask many questions, and your body is important to be able to sustain that consciousness. So that is a relative reality. And it is really important at first to break free from the illusionary reality, which we build up concepts, ideas which have no fundamental correlation to the actual universe in which we live. So actually the Newtonian science is very primitive, but the quantum physics is already catching up to how the universe actually works. The quantum physics, the most modern scientific research, and the science is moving more and more into understanding the nature of the universe and the nature of consciousness, which will always be a mystery to science because that is the source and quite immeasurable. But the science can perceive as different states of consciousness or the quantum field which they call consciousness, but that is not the end because that is the universal mind. They call it the universal consciousness. However, the source is beyond that. So that this also needs to be stated. That God is not the universal mind. Many people ask that. God is the source. It is much higher than the universal mind. It is the source from which the universe came. Any questions?
Like the second universe, third universe. Like how would you describe them? Can you access them in some way?
Science has actually already noticed that there are boundaries of this universe. It's, of course, there's no such a word infinite because now the science recognizes that the universe has, that the space is expanding and then they can see where it is reaching. So the infinite is of the past when they had no tools to measure it. And now scientists found that there is some anomalies where the universe ends and there is some kind of a border and some kind of interference with possibly another universe. So they might be touching each other. So even the modern science is now reaching a point of understanding that there might be another way, another universe, and they already know about parallel universes, parallel timelines. So the quantum physics truly opens up the knowledge of how physics and this energy universe really works, which I truly admire, and many, Nikola Tesla, Einstein, and David, and what's his name, Stephen Hawkins, they truly came up with many precise insights, although some of them might not be completely precise, where they maybe would theorize without any scientific proof yet. However, some of the theories are very, very insightful and real. So this is a very beautiful depiction for us to understand what is illusionary, which is the accumulated bubble, individual bubble, but then the universe actually has laws, the way it works. And everything is important. Your body is important, this environment is important, everything is important because of the law of harmony. You cannot reach high states of consciousness or enlightenment if you are not in harmony with the laws of the nature. You cannot sustain the consciousness if you are not within the laws of the nature. So Buddhism, I would say, is the first, is the you cannot even call it a religion or philosophy, because they have very precise insights in how energy universe truly works, like causality, cause and effect. Okay. Yes. So this gives an idea of importance to know how this universe works, how does the energy work. And the higher the consciousness, the more there is, we could say, responsibility or ability to respond in a harmonious way with what is. Ability to respond in a harmonious way to what is, so that we truly function within the laws of the nature, even actually the natural state, the natural consciousness already implies that we live in a natural way which is not distorted through the mental programming and mental perceptions implied out of human unconsciousness. So this is the diagram for us to know what is illusionary, that this is relatively real, and in the absolute reality that transcends all the laws of nature, although this form functions within the laws of nature. So it is important to be within the laws of nature so that you can be free. You know, you have to transcend the laws of the nature to be completely free. And transcendence means that you achieved harmony. That's what is transcendence. You transcend distortions, achieve harmony, and thus you are liberated.